The Patriotic Alliance are growing at a substantial rate. But are they damaging the DA to the extent that many people believe? We are going to use data to determine the answer. So there are two sets of data that we actually need to take a look at in order to determine whether or not the PA really are biting into the DA's voter base in such a substantial way. The first would be the 2024 election results, because after all, this was the PA's breakout election. The second piece of data would be select by-election results, where we actually saw the PA and the DA going head to head. And many of these results are quite eye-opening. But let's start chronologically with the 2024 election results. So, if we start by looking with a provincial view, the most important place to begin is the Western Cape. This is because, to a very large extent, PA leader Gauteng McKenzie has viewed the coloured voter base as being his main focal point, and primarily those in the Western Cape. So, in 2024, we saw the DA retain its majority in the Western Cape at about 53%. Now, if we compare this to 2019, we see that the DA has pretty much held steady. In actual fact, they've grown a little bit in percentage because back in 2019, they had about 52.4% of the vote. What's important to note, however, is that voter turnout has dropped substantially. In 2019, we saw a turnout of about 68.2%, where the DA had a little over 1.1 million votes in the Western Cape. In 2024, however, we saw voter turnout drop to 60.6%, which is roughly 8 percentage point decline. We then saw the DA get about 1,056,000 votes. Now, if we look at the PA's vote tally, they had just over 145,900 votes. So it's clear that whatever voters the DA lost are not enough in order to make up for the PA's tally. What's really interesting, however, is if we take a closer look at the ANC's voter turnout. So in 2024, we saw that a little over 424,000 people voted for the ANC, right? And this equates to about 21.3% of the vote. But if we go back to 2019, we see that the ANC had about 659,000 votes. This means that from 2019 to 2024, the ANC lost almost 200,000 votes and about 10 percentage points. Now, what's very interesting about the PA's vote is that growing from almost nothing in 2019, they managed to get about 145,900 votes in 2024. That's 7.3% of the vote. And so it's safe to assume that a very large chunk, in fact, the overwhelming majority of PA votes in the Western Cape, came from former ANC voters, not DA voters. More evidence of this is actually revealed when, instead of looking at everything on a provincial level, we drill down into the municipalities and the wards. Now, we don't actually have the time to drill down into every single municipality, but what we can do is take a look at the election map from the municipal perspective, just to get an idea of the overall trend. What's immediately noticeable is that in 2024, the DA was the winner in every single municipality in the Western Cape. In 2019, however, it won the majority, but not all of the Western Cape municipalities. This is only possible in two ways. One, the DA had to have overtaken the ANC in those areas, which we see is not really possible because they held steady, except for a few outliers. The second, more likely scenario is that the ANC lost support while the DA held steady, and so by holding steady, they overtook the ANC in the final outcome. We can actually already see this if we drill down to certain specific municipalities. One example is Cederberg. In 2024, the DA won Cederberg with 39.5% of the vote. In 2019, however, the DA came in second with that exact same percentage, 39.5%. The ANC won back in 2019 with 46.8%. But what happened? Well, it's very simple. The ANC dropped to 24.6%, a massive decline in 2024, whereas the PA actually overtook the ANC, grabbing second place with 26.8% of the vote. And so clearly what happened here is that the DA held steady, whereas the PA ripped into the ANC. We also saw this happen in Beaufort West. So, back in 2019, the ANC won Beaufort West with 43.2% of the vote, almost 6,700 votes in total, whereas the DA came in second with 41.1% of the vote. Fast forward to 2024, the DA actually lost a few hundred votes, but their percentage went up to 41.3%. They managed to win first place due to the erosion of the ANC yet again, which plummeted to 29.5% of the vote. It seems that the majority of the ANC's missing vote went to the PA, which came in with 14.9% of the vote and a little over 2,100 votes in total. And so what we're seeing here is a very clear trend. Now, what's actually also important for us to look at is a fairly overlooked province, namely the Northern Cape. The reason why I say that the Northern Cape is so important for us to look at is because this is actually the province where the PA did the best in the 2024 election, grabbing 8.4% of the vote and a little over 33,000 votes. Back in 2019, we see that the DA came in with 24.3% of the vote, whereas the ANC was the big winner with 58.2%, a little over 239,000 votes. In 2024, however, the ANC got decimated here. They only had a little bit over 196,000 votes, or 49.3%. The DA also dropped off. We see that they got about 84,000 votes. And if we take a look at the PA, they grabbed about 8.4%, or a little over 33,000 votes. And so what we see here is a likelihood that the PA bit off a chunk of both the DA's vote and the ANC. Now, there is, of course, the possibility that some DA voters maybe decided not to vote in this election, sit it out. Because, of course, if we take a look at another natural ally and actually rival of the DA, namely the Freedom Front Plus, they also didn't fare too well in 2024. We see that they got about 1.7% of the vote, a little over 6,800 votes, whereas in 2019, they had a little over 13,500 votes. And so it doesn't make much sense to assume that some DA voters went there. And we also don't expect the DA voters to have gone to the EFF. And so in the Northern Cape, it seems that the PA may have taken some DA voters, but again, they seem to have bitten a far bigger chunk into the ANC. Seeing as we've established a clear trend from the 2024 election results, it's time to take a look at the by-election results, particularly those that are most recent. So, if we look at April this year, in Gauteng, we saw a pretty interesting by-election in Ward 82, which is quite a diverse suburb in Johannesburg. Here, the PA actually emerged victorious, having previously gotten 15% of the vote. They emerged with 42%, vastly outperforming the DA, which dropped from 24% to 15%. The ANC also struggled, falling from 16% to 12%. And so what this shows us is that the PA has actually been able to penetrate into Gauteng as well, threatening both the ANC and the DA. While the PA did very well to establish its foothold in Gauteng, we can't forget about the Western Cape. And what we've actually seen this year in by-elections is that the PA is directly taking votes away from the DA in the Western Cape at a rate that we've never seen before, at least not in 2024. So, back in June, we saw a by-election take place in Mussel Bay, Ward 9, in which the PA actually won, marking its very first ward that it's ever won in Mussel Bay. Surging from 7% to 51%, the PA was able to unseat the DA, which went from 45% previously to 39%, which is clearly a massive concern for the party. Meanwhile, the ANC trailed in third place with a measly 8%, down from 17%. If you thought that the loss in Mussel Bay was a big blow for the DA, a month later, the Patriotic Alliance dealt the DA the biggest blow that it had to date. This, of course, was in the municipal by-election in Paarl. So, in Ward 27, in Amstelhof Paarl, located in the Cape Winelands District Municipality, the Patriotic Alliance surged from just 1% of the vote to 43%, overtaking the DA at 39%, which is a decline from the 58% that it previously had. Now, this is probably the biggest shock to the DA to date, given just how much of a stronghold Paarl and the surrounding region is to the DA. In fact, it's probably the biggest DA stronghold in the country, let alone the Western Cape. A month later, the trend continued, and the PA threatened not only the DA, but the ANC as well. In the Western Cape, in Ward 7, the DA was able to just barely hold on to its ward seat, dropping from 62% to 43% of the vote. The PA, in contrast, skyrocketed from 6% to 37%, just 6% off the DA, while the ANC almost halved its support from 31% to 16%. But that's not all. If we shift our focus to Knysna in Ward 3, the ANC fell from 69% to 50%. The Patriotic Alliance went from 8% to 48%, meaning it was just 2 points shy of the ANC's total, and within touching distance of unseating the ANC. And so what we see from these results is a very interesting trend. You see, While the PA did not directly threaten the DA to a substantial extent in the 2024 elections, they seem to be edging ever closer to chipping away at the DA vote in its heartland, particularly in the most recent by-elections. Still, it seems that the Patriotic Alliance's main source of votes seems to be former ANC voters. And so while the PA is chipping away at the DA's vote, they seem to be taking a much bigger chunk out of the ANC. And this brings us to a very interesting situation in South African politics. While parties such as the Freedom Front Plus traditionally compete with the DA for votes, whereas the likes of EFF and MK compete with the ANC, the Patriotic Alliance has emerged as a unique contender, being able to fish in both ponds. Now, this is very interesting, as if the PA is able to continue its exponential growth, it will be able to erode both the ANC and DA voter bases, and perhaps create a new political scenario in South Africa. With months to go until the 2026 or 2027 local elections, this certainly seems like they are exciting times to come. Thanks very much for tuning into this video. If you liked it, please remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Until next time, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is the Power Pod.